Good evening. I would like to call to order the City Council meeting for the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado for September 9th, 2024. Thank you all for being here. We appreciate your attendance at our meetings, always. So if you would please stand as you are able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Our Deputy City Manager is acting as our City Clerk tonight, so thank you for being here. Would the Acting Clerk please call the roll?
Thank you, Mayor. Councilor Snell?
Present.
Councilor Ohm?
Here.
Councilor Holteen?
Present.
Councilor Weaver?
Here.
Councilor Stites?
Here.
Councilor Hoppy?
Present.
Councilor Larson?
Here.
And Councilor Dozeman.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum?
Thank you. Councilors, in your packet, we have meetings for the August 19, 2024 study session notes. Are there any corrections or notations to be made in the notes? Seeing none, we'll let those stand as presented with our thanks to the clerk. Are there any changes to be requested in the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move with the agenda as presented. We have a couple of proclamations today, so I will see you at the podium. I would like to ask James Gallardo, Lorena Vasquez, and Adrian Hernandez with the City of Wheat Ridge Parks and Recreation to join me at the podium. Hi, how are you tonight? Good, thanks. Thanks for coming. Hello. Good to see you. Thank you. Come on up here. Stand up there. This is a proclamation in support of National Hispanic Heritage Month. Whereas Hispanic Americans have contributed greatly to our nation in all areas, including science, art, music, sports, education, and public service, and have bravely served their country in large numbers in times of peace, war, and in every way in our nation's history. And whereas in 1968, Congress authorized President Lyndon B. Johnson to proclaim National Hispanic American Heritage Week, and this observance was expanded in 1988 to a month-long celebration. And whereas during this month, Americans celebrate the traditions, ancestry, and unique experiences of those who trace their family background to Spain and Latin American countries. And whereas 21% of Wheat Ridge residents identify as Hispanic or Latino. And whereas, throughout our history, Hispanic Americans have enriched the American way of life, and we recognize the millions of Hispanic Americans whose love of family, hard work, and community help unite us as a nation. And whereas, accomplishments made by Hispanic Americans serve as an inspiration to all who seek freedom, opportunity, and a new beginning for themselves and their children. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Bud Starker, and the Wheat Ridge City Council wish to recognize September 15th to October 15th as National Hispanic Heritage Month and encourage residents of Wheat Ridge to celebrate the cultural, professional, educational, and civic contributions of our Hispanic community. Thank you. And I want to give this to you. And would you like to say a few words?
I'm Lorena Vasquez, and I am a recreation specialist over at the Rec Center, and I just wanted to say I'm very honored for being here today. Thank you.
My name is Adrian Hernandez. I am part of Parks and Recreations. I work and help clean up and maintain parks around the city. I just want to say thank you for the 8 years working here and for the many opportunities I was able to get being here. And I cannot describe how much it changed my life. Do it for the better. Thank you.
James Gallardo, graphic designer here, works at Parks and Rec and marketing, and I've been working about 3-4 years, been a member of the Wheat Ridge residents for about 20-something years. So it's good to be part of this. I'd love to see the council and everyone work so progressively into honor and recognition, and it means a lot to us. It means a lot to community. So,
All right. Thank you.
salute.
Salud. Open the roll. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate y'all coming up. Thanks so much. All right. And I would like, for our next presentation, to invite Counselor Dozman, Leah Dozman, up to make some announcements.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all of my colleagues on City Council, city staff, and members of the public that are here this evening. I have had the honor of being on the Carnation Festival board since 2015, and I have chaired the Carnation Festival Parade for the last 8 years. It's a tradition to thank not only the board and committee members, but also the city, and carry on a longstanding tradition of giving the city of Wheat Ridge a plate. So the city of Wheat Ridge was incorporated in August 1969, and the Carnation Festival is an annual festival that has around 30,000 attendees over a 3-day period of time. We have the spaghetti dinner, we've had the Zope Family Circus, fireworks, live music, beer gardens that help support many of our local service organizations. And it's a nod to our heritage of being the carnation capital of the world when we were a rural community. So this year we celebrated our 55th annual Carnation Festival, and it is to many thanks for the board members, particularly Joe DeMott, who has chaired the festival for now this was his 13th year. We have many longstanding residents and community members that contribute hundreds of hours each and every year. And it's incredible to see what goes on behind the scenes to put on an event to welcome that many people into Wheat Ridge each and every year. We have wonderful support from our local businesses, including Personal Achievement Martial Arts, Intermountain Health, Lutheran Hospital as sponsors. They come and participate in the parade, and it's just a wonderful event for the city of Wheat Ridge, and we welcome a lot of local residents each and every year. And that would not be possible without the city of Wheat Ridge and their partnership and their contribution to the festival, not only financially, but also the weekend and the week of. So the city provides Wheat Ridge Police Department, Parks and Rec, Public Works that help with all of the infrastructure, security, and everything from permitting to cleaning up the parks and everything in between. And it would not be possible without that partnership. So I would just like to thank everyone, my colleagues and city staff, in supporting the Carnation Festival and coming out and having a good time. And this is your 55th minus COVID plate. Thank you.
Thank you, Leah. Okay. Yeah. I know. Okay. Oh. Okay, I didn't sign up. We didn't have a sign-up sheet. Oh, okay. We are now at our public's right to speak. This is an opportunity for members of the public to come forward to speak on items that are not on the agenda for 3 minutes to address the council We will also take comment tonight on our special study session at this time. So if there is an item on the special study session that a speaker would like to speak on, we will take that. And I have a couple of speakers, I believe, here. Joining us online is, and when I call your name, if you'd please unmute yourself and introduce yourself, Lindsay Rasmussen. Are you with us, Lindsay?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can. Please go ahead.
Great. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to speak. My name is Lindsay Rasmussen, and I serve as the lead campaign consultant with Citizens for Jeffco's Future, which is a committee that's dedicated to supporting Jefferson County's ballot measure 1A, which will be on the ballot this November. So as we all know, Jefferson County is facing some critical funding challenges, and Measure 1A is a simple, common sense solution. The measure asks voters if the county can retain and spend the full revenue that it already collects without raising taxes or the mill levy rate. Essentially, it allows the county to remove the arbitrary cap that is imposed by the state's Taxpayer Bill of Rights, also commonly referred to as TABOR. The money will be used in two key areas: transportation and infrastructure, and public safety. Without this measure, Jeffco will face a $20 million budget cut next year. Over the past few years, we've already seen pretty significant cuts, specifically $16.1 million in 2020 and $8.7 million in 2021, which have only worsened the backlog of critical projects like road maintenance. The county simply can't keep up with its growing infrastructure needs and essential services under the current revenue cap. So if passed, Measure 1A will allow Jeffco to function like most other Colorado counties that have already approved similar measures. In fact, Jeffco is one of two counties in Colorado that has not approved a measure of this kind. Really emphasize is that this is not a tax increase. We're simply asking voters to allow the county to keep the revenue that it's already collected. Currently, excess revenues are refunded back to taxpayers in small amounts, about $22 per resident annually. If approved, those funds, which will be about $30.5 million next year, would instead be invested back into our community's infrastructure and safety services. So the council the Wheat Ridge Council has a resolution basically asking y'all to support this measure. And I ask that you pass this resolution and support this critical measure that will not only bring reprieve to Jefferson County's budget, but of course Wheat Ridge as one of the cities right in the heart of the county.
Thank you very much. We appreciate you joining us tonight. I have one person signed up to speak in our study session. It's Russell. If you'd please come to the podium and give us your first name and your last name and tell us whether you live or work in Wheat Ridge, and then you'll have 3 minutes to address the council on the study session item.
My name is Russell Silman. I live in Wheat Ridge. I work at Sub and Sam's Sinclair Convenience Store located at 9491 West 44th Avenue. And what we're asking the city council to do is to change the city code on tobacco sales within 1,000 feet of a youth-oriented facility slightly to achieve the same results, but just in a longer period of time. Because we think that the current code will drastically negatively affect current people, current owners of the establishment. So we could still achieve the same results, but without any devastating effects to the business owners. And thank you very much for our opportunity to speak with the council and bring this matter up also. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight. That concludes all of the speakers I have signed up to speak tonight under public comment. We will now go to agenda item number 1. Councilor Hoppe, would you please introduce this item? Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to present the consent agenda, item 1A, motion to award the 2024 striping and pavement marking project base bid and bid alternate 1 to Colorado Barricade Company of Denver, Colorado, and approve subsequent payments in the amount of $238,100 with a contingency amount of $11,900 for a total not to exceed the amount of $250,000. Item 1B, motion to award the 2024 concrete repairs ADA pedestrian ramps project base bid and bid alternate 1 to Majestic Concrete Contractors, Inc. of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, and approve a contract in the amount of $556,504.60 with a contingency amount of $55,650.46 for a total not to exceed the amount of $612,155.06. Item 1C, motion to approve the purchase and payment of one 2024 vehicle replacement and the purchase and payment for the installation of lighting and auxiliary and communications equipment in a total amount not to exceed $90,000. Item 1D, motion to approve the purchase and payment to Schlosser Signs, Inc. for services to complete design and installation of the recreation sign project for a total not to exceed the amount of $92,303.58 with a project contingency not to exceed $6,900.
Thank you. This is our consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve consent agenda items 1A through 1D?
I move to approve consent agenda items 1A through 1D.
We have a motion and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Stites. Would the acting clerk please poll the council?
All ayes, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you. We will now go to agenda item number 2. Councilor Dozeman, would you please introduce this item?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council Bill 18, 2024, an ordinance authorizing the issuance by the city of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, of its sales and use tax revenue, refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2024, and providing other details in connection therewith. At issue, at the regular general election held on November 7th, 2023, the electorate of the city approved ballot question 2J, which extended the 0.5% sales and use tax levied by the city and authorized the issuance of debt to finance city investment in capital improvement projects. Sales and use tax revenue bonds will be issued to finance the city investments, which requires approval of an ordinance by city council. A change was made to the bond ordinance following first reading and is reflected in the first attachment. In summary, after additional financial analysis, it was determined it is prudent for the city to include approximately $5 million of the 2017 bond debt in this new issuance, defeasing the remaining 2017 debt with approximately $7.3 million of the 2E fund balance.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is not quasi-judicial. It is a public hearing. I'm going to open the public hearing. And Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
We do. Thank you, Mayor. I'll start out and turn it over to our guest here in a second. As was noted in the issue statement by Councilmember Dozeman, we have in front of you this evening an ordinance to authorize the city to issue up to $75 million in bonds to invest in city infrastructure, as was approved by close to 70% of the Wheat Ridge voters in November of '23. Those projects will include sidewalk, bike lanes, street improvements on primary street corridors such as 32nd Avenue, 38th Avenue, 44th Avenue, Youngfield Street, filling sidewalk gaps and other sidewalk repair and replacement with an emphasis on major pedestrian corridors and routes to schools, drainage and floodplain infrastructure improvements at priority locations in the city. IRS rules require that 85% of our bond proceeds from tax-exempt bonds must be spent within a 3-year period. Because of this, we will plan to issue at least 2 tranches of bonds so that we have staff capacity to complete the projects within this time frame. The first issuance we're looking at will generate approximately $32.4 million in project funds to complete the projects that are listed in attachment 6 in your agenda packet. Maria is here this evening if you have any further questions on those specific projects. We're shooting for a bond closing by the end of October this year, which we hope will take advantage of a predicted interest rate reduction in the next several weeks. To help summarize the bond documents in front of you this evening, we do have some guests here this evening, which we will talk about the logistics and the next steps of this bond issuance. First of all, we have with us our bond counsel, with Butler Snow, Kim Crawford, who is working with the city to ensure that we comply with all IRS and other regulations. And then our bond underwriter, Nate Eckloff, who is working with the city to help us package the best bond deal as possible. So with that, I want to invite Kim Crawford up, begin with Butler Snow, and she will provide a high-level summary of the legal rules and regulations that we are following through with this ordinance. Kim?
Hi, thank you. Kim Crawford with Butler Snow. Pleasure to be here this evening, and it's always a pleasure to work with the city. We assisted with your 2016 election and again with your election last year. So this ordinance really, and the ballot question in 23 really just extended the tax that had already been approved by the voters in 16. So you're extending that tax. You're allowing it to pay the old bonds, which are the 17 bonds, and the new bonds. This ordinance allows you to do that. It authorizes a project in the amount of not to exceed 75 million, and then with the max annual and max total repayment cost of what was approved in the ballot question. However, you can do anything less than that. And as you were told, the IRS requires that you have a reasonable expectation to spend 85% of the proceeds within 3 years. So you're going to be doing this in 2 different, what they call tranches. So you'll issue some now and some, several years from now. This resolution also allows you the authority to refund any or all of the 2017 bonds, and the changes to the parameters that were discussed, that were the changes in the packet for tonight, give you that flexibility to refund all of them if you should so choose. And that will kind of be based on market conditions at the time of the sale. So Nate can speak more about that. So the sales tax ordinance is essentially what you approved in 2017 when you issued those bonds. You're pledging 1% of your sales tax revenue plus the 0.5% that was approved by the voters in 16. That will expire when those bonds are paid off. That amount will. So those are the amounts that you're going to be pledging to the repayment of those bonds. You are supposed to, you can't issue additional bonds unless you meet the rate covenant test, which is another change that was made in your packet. Last time in 2017, the bond issue said that you couldn't issue additional bonds unless your sales tax coverage was 200%, which meant that you would have 2 times coverage. You could pay, your sales tax revenue was sufficient to pay your debt service twice. And now it went down to 175%, which is a little bit more flexible for the city. I think those are really essentially all of the high level points of this. The bond ordinance approves the form of certain agreements. The paying agent agreement, which is with BOK Financial. They were your paying agent for your last bond issue. It approves the form of an escrow agreement, which you would need to do a refunding because you have to put that money into an escrow bank because it's going to be pledged to pay your old bonds back, and you can't use that for anything else. It approves the form of a bond purchase agreement, which was on file with the city as well, and the form of a preliminary official statement. And that document is a really long document that is also on file, and you're welcome to read if you'd like. It contains all of the information that an investor would want to know in order to make an informed investment decision to buy your bonds. So it has a lot of stuff about, who you are, what you do, what your sales tax coverage is, what you're going to do with this, who you all are, and your staff, and who's running your city essentially. So that information, it's really interesting document if you wanted to take a quick look at that. So with that, I'll open it up to any questions. There's a lot more, as you know, it's like a not quite 70 page. It's a 50-page document, 40-page document. And a lot of it, again, deals with how your bonds are paid and structured and who pays what when and stuff like that. But those are the biggest details.
Nate, do you want to present first before we take questions? You might be able to answer any questions that they may have before they.
Hello again, everyone. My name is Nate Eklop, Managing Director with Piper Sandler. I want to thank you for the opportunity to serve the city of Wheat Ridge for the sale of your upcoming sale, I should say, of your sales and use tax bonds, should you approve it this evening. So very quickly, I was just going to talk about the size of the 2 issues, the interest rate real quickly, and then talk about the timetable. It sounds like a lot, but I'll make it very quick. To accommodate the issuance of the new money, we are refunding a portion of the existing bonds from 2017, and a little less than $5 million as of today anyway, about $4,855,000. The interest rate on those old bonds was a 3.92%. We're looking at the refunding to have a net interest cost of about 3.20, 3.2, so it's a slightly lower interest rate. There's a slight savings of not quite $100,000 in today's market to refinance those earlier bonds. So it accomplishes two things. It creates a very, I'll say, small savings on behalf of the city, but then it also allows the new money issue to go forward. And then for the new money issue, we're looking at roughly $30 million transaction this time around. We're looking at a true interest cost of about a 3.71%. So in today's market, those bonds will go out to 2043. So for the 20-year period of time, you're basically being able to issue bonds at 4% or less. So very good in today's market. We're not looking to price these bonds for a couple of weeks yet. We have to finish the rating process as well as get the offering document into the public. We're expecting, I think the market's baked in. I was talking to Councilmember Larson before the meeting. Market's basically baked in some interest rate reduction. We're expecting rates hopefully to go down just a bit more between now and when we price the bonds. So we'll cross our fingers on that. But a very attractive rate, given that rates have come down over the course of this last year. Timing-wise, we're expecting, assuming you approve this evening, we would have a call with the rating agencies on the 18th of September. We would look to receive a rating by the 27th of September, and hopefully then price the bonds about a week to 10 days thereafter and be able to close the transaction before the end of October. That's sort of a high level of the timing at this juncture. So do you have any questions either for Kim or myself?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I have no members of the public signed up to speak on this, so I'll go directly to council. Do we have any questions for Ms. Crawford or Mr. Eckloff? Councilor Holteen.
Thank you. This is actually a question for staff, sorry, our experts. Given the IRS requirements for the spend down time period, what are the city's plans around making sure that we've got adequate staffing in order to get the projects, engineered and planned and through? Is this does this require additional staffing? Is that something that we're looking at? Because I know that the last bonds were quite a strain on staff at times.
Yeah,
so.
and we're still wrapping up those bonds,
Yeah.
2E and the urban renewal bonds, which were primarily infrastructure projects. Maria and I were talking about that, and we are looking at hiring additional project manager for the CIP projects, and we can use the bond funds for that. I believe it's called, what was that, 5%? The working capital portion, you could use up to 5% of the bonds for that. So we're looking at hiring at least one capital projects manager to help with those projects.
Okay, good, thanks.
Okay, before I close the public hearing and ask for a vote, are there any other questions from council? Hearing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and Councilor Dozman, may I have a motion on this item?
I move to approve Council Bill 18, 2024, an ordinance authorizing the issuance by the City of Wheat Ridge, Colorado, of its sales and use tax revenue refunding and improvement bonds, Series 2024, and providing other details in connection therewith on second reading, and that it takes effect immediately.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Councilor Dozman, Councilor Holteen, excuse me. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
All ayes, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you very much. We will now go to agenda item number 3. Councilor Ohm, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mayor. Council Bill number 19-2024, an ordinance amending Title 19, Article 4, the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning disposition of lost or abandoned property at issue. Discrepancy exists between Code Sections 19-80 and 19-77 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning the disposition of lost or abandoned property. To correct that discrepancy, the Wheat Ridge Police Department is requesting that Code Section 19-80 be amended to render consistent with Code Section 19-77 and the standard operating procedures of the police department.
Thank you. This is an ordinance on second reading. It is not quasi-judicial, but it is a public hearing, and I'm going to open the public hearing right now. And Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
We do. This is a very simple cleanup, but Mr. Dahl can give a little bit more context to it.
Mr. Dahl.
Thank you very much. This is at the request of the police department. There are two sections. There's actually several sections dealing with lost or abandoned property, and that's consistent for all cities and counties in the state. We often end up with, the government ends up with property that's lost or abandoned. especially police departments that seize property or property comes into their possession in connection with some kind of event and is never claimed. And you've probably understood that that's often auctioned or it's donated. Police departments use it in various ways and try to make sure there's a good use for that property. We have code sections that govern how that property is to be converted to cash or otherwise dealt with, because in the initial event, it's not the city's property. So how do you dispose of property that you technically don't own? And that's what these code sections do, and all cities have a form of them. Two of the code sections talk about timeframes. One of them says, okay, if we can give you a notice, a written notice, and if 30 days goes by and you haven't claimed the property, if we've got a last known address kind of thing from the police department, we can sell it. The code section we're amending says, okay, that or whichever period's longer, and you'll notice it's really in the chief's memo on the second page where he says this wording implies that regardless of whether or not the department mails a notice, they've got to hold on to the property for 60 days. And their protocol really is they mail the notice, they wait the 30 days, they dispose of it. And that's important because storage space becomes a real issue for abandoned property in any city, especially here. So I realize there's not much of a change. We're just deleting the words whichever is the longer period. But in doing that, it'll harmonize the code sections and make sure the department can continue with its standard protocol, which is to send a notice, and if they don't hear anything back in 30 days, they can dispose. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dahl. I have no one signed up from the public to speak on this, so I'll open it up to questions from council. Staff on this item, Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you. And Mr. Goff, we have a citizen group that looks over the spending of this. Is that true? Is that the same group?
That's on the forfeitures and seizures.
Yeah.
Yeah, program. I think the mayor, are you on that? Or the city treasurer's on that? Police chief. This is different.
Okay.
This is abandoned property. That's forfeitures and seizures are from criminal activity where we retain money or goods that are valuable.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, and Councilor Ome, have a motion on this item.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve Council Bill number 19-2024, an ordinance amending Title 19, Article 4 of the Wheat Ridge Code of Laws concerning disposition of lost or abandoned property, and that it take effect 15 days after final publication.
We have a motion and a second by Mayor Pro Tem Stites. Is there discussion on the motion? Seeing none, will the deputy clerk please, or the acting clerk, please poll the council?
All ayes, no nays, the motion carries.
Okay, thank you. We will now go to agenda item number 4. Mayor Pro Tem Stites, would you please introduce this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Motion to approve a professional services agreement with Olson in an amount not to exceed $1,067,000 to provide design, environmental, and right-of-way services for the Wadsworth Path project. At issue in 2022, the city was awarded a $7.5 million grant through the Denver Regional Council of Governments Transportation Improvement Program to construct a multi-use path along the west side of the Wadsworth Boulevard between 32nd Avenue and 35th Avenue. The Public Works Department solicited and evaluated proposals from 5 firms. Staff is recommending that the city enter into a contract with Olson for the design, environmental, and right-of-way phases of the project. The fee amount was negotiated with Olson and includes an approximate 3% contingency amount to address minor changes that may arise during the design process.
Thank you. This will be a motion of the council. It is not quasi-judicial. Mr. Goff, do we have a staff presentation on this item?
Nothing else really, just that we're excited to get this project started. Happy to get a very large grant to make this a very good, nice project. So Maria is here if you have any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I don't have any members of the public signed up to speak on this, so I will go to questions from council. Any discussion on this item? Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And the only question I have is there a sort of a rough timeline for when this thing would begin and end? I know that people are anxious to get Wadsworth back to where it ought to be, and if this is going to further disrupt that, we should know.
Certainly, I can take that. Councilmember Larson. Our intent is to kick off design probably within the next week or so if this is successful this evening. And the design would take the rest of probably into the spring of 2025, but we would hope that the intent would be is that by late summer next year, we'd be issuing the construction bids. And so probably starting late fall or fall to winter of next year and completing then probably in the spring of 2026.
Additional questions of staff on this item? Seeing none, Mayor Pro Tem Stites, may I have a motion on this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve a professional services agreement with Olson in the amount not to exceed $1,067,000 to provide design, environmental, and right-of-way services for the Wadsworth Path project.
Second.
Oh, I guess Counselor Hoppy got the second on that one. She's pretty good at that. So we have a motion and a second. Do we have discussion on the motion? Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just, so thank you, Counselor Larson, for asking the question I would have asked. Just really excited to see this moving forward. And again, I want to recognize how successful the city's been getting the competitive dollars for investments like this regionally. We do an extraordinary job of putting forward good projects. They're scored based on a lot of things, including the city's ability to provide its own funding, but also community input and the process that these projects come around, but also impact is part of it. So this is a great project, and I just personally am really excited because it sounds like it is going to be completed. And I will be able to ride my bike here instead of having to go west up through Lutheran to get to City Council on Monday night. So I am really looking forward to, in 2026, riding my bike all the way down Wadsworth to safely get to City Hall. So it's a great project, and I will look forward to it completing. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Ohm.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm many times I've driven by that and I've seen people walking on the dirt and trying to get through, and I'm really proud that our city is going forward with putting in the sidewalk, and we have amazing partners that staff has worked with to get this started, and looking very forward to seeing some progress and to the completion date. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In November, I've been sitting at this dais for 9 years. 2 years prior to that, Councilmember Tim Fitzgerald, God rest his soul, started the fight for this piece of sidewalk. And once he could no longer join us on the dais, I took up bringing it up every time we had budget season. And I know it's expensive. It's a pricey piece of land. It's difficult. It has a lot of trickery to it. But I am just so proud of us, and I know that Tim would be so happy to have this done.
Thank you, Counselor. I appreciate that. Any additional comments on that? So seeing none, will the clerk please poll the council?
All ayes, no nays, the motion carries.
Thank you. That, pardon me, that concludes our agenda items. We will now go to the next item, which, if my memory serves right, the city manager's matters. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just very quickly, we received our ballot numbers for our 2 ballot questions from the county. So the charter cleanup ballots number will be 2B, and the height question to amend the city charter for the Luther Legacy campus will be 2C. So 2B and 2C this year. That's it.
Okay, thank you very much. City Attorney's matters, Mr. Dahl.
Nothing tonight, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We will go with elected officials matters and start with Councilor Snell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Talk about a day this past weekend that I really wanted to clone myself. We had so much going on in Wheat Ridge Saturday, and I couldn't make everything, but I was very happy to be involved in a few things that are very important to our community. The Alliance for Collective Action held a farm tour that started off at the Wheat Ridge Center for Music and Arts on Saturday morning. I was very honored to be a part of that and share some information about the center, about the kitchen that we are putting together and opening for small business use. But it was just a super impactful event. We welcomed folks from all over. I know Councilor Hulteen will speak more about specifics, but I just wanted to say it was truly an honor to be a part of that, and kudos to the entire team for just an amazing job that they did putting that together. So from there, I went to get a tattoo. Jefferson Center for Mental Health held an event called Hope Inc. and partnered with several area tattoo studios, giving semicolon tattoos. I was lucky enough to get on the list to get one, and got to spend some time talking with volunteers for Jefferson Center at the tattoo studio while I waited, and also the artists that I spoke to and the folks that were doing my tattoo. And one really impactful thing that I'm continually reminded of is just how widespread and how much suicide affects everyone. And so it's very, very important that we have events like this, that we make it part of our conversation, that we reach out to folks, that we just check in and continue to not be afraid to talk about it, because it's important. And I was very glad to be a part of that. Thank you so much to Jefferson Center for doing that, and for the studios to partner with them, and the volunteers that came out. Apparently it was a very, very smooth event for everyone involved. So hopefully it can happen again. And then two more quick things. This Tuesday, tomorrow, is our first meeting of the IDEA Committee. Really excited to get that going. We've got some fantastic community members on that committee, so lots coming up. Really, really excited to get that going. And then I would encourage everyone to mark their calendars for September 22nd, which is a Sunday. Panorama Park Sustainable Neighborhood is holding a community bike ride around District 1, talking about some different sustainability things, the garden there at Panorama Park, and just spending some time rolling around the neighborhood. And then we'll end at Mestizo for some dinner. So get that on your calendars now. I know our calendars are filling up. So starts at 4 o'clock at Panorama Park on the 22nd. That's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Go to Counselor Hulteen.
Yeah, tag team with Counselor Snell. Yeah, I felt like this weekend was just so Wheat Ridge-tastic. I collapsed in bed last night and wasn't sure I was going to be able to get up this morning. So on Saturday, there was the Alliance for Collective Action hosted this urban agriculture tour, and it started and ended in Wheat Ridge and included Happiness Gardens and Roost Farms. And we were fortunate enough that a colleague I met in DC at the National League of Cities Conference, Dr. Dwayne Goldman with USDA. He's the first ever senior advisor on racial equity and justice to the USDA. He came out at our invitation to be part of the event and to really get a sense of the good work that we're doing here and regionally, but a lot of it was really focused on Wheat Ridge. So the tour itself was spectacular. We had a lunch at Happiness Gardens that included the mayor and Councilmember Ohm, and we had 50 people at one long table at Happiness Gardens, and we were served some of the most extraordinary food I think I've ever had in my entire life. That was prepared by Narissa Ribera, who is the kitchen partner with Jenny, and it was just every ingredient in every dish had a story of where it came from and how it was carefully tended to and cultivated. And at the end of the tour, I was asking Dr. Goldman about his impressions of Wheat Ridge, having heard about it now for a few years since we met. And his job is to travel across the country and meet with communities. And, since he's been appointed, I don't know how many communities he's been to, but this year he's been to almost 80 communities across the country. And he said without hesitation that Wheat Ridge is in the top 5 communities across the country that's doing the right things around urban agriculture from a policy and a programming and a partnership standpoint. I mean, he was thoroughly impressed. We sent them back to DC with some requests, and we're hoping that translates to additional funding and investments in the work we're doing here, and hoping that that reaches our disadvantaged producers, and that the city continues to be a strong partner in that. So super proud. I won't steal Councilmember Weaver's thunder, but then Dr. Goldman and I did go and attend Dr. Weaver's event. And then we all had dinner at Aguas Caliente, so he got to just experience all the flavors of Wheat Ridge. But it just was really proud of our community, just who we are as people, but the good work we're doing when it comes through so clearly like that. It just is a moment for all of us to be proud. And then I hosted my block party yesterday in partnership with some of my neighbors. It was our 10th anniversary, and we had about 80 people come, and it was just really exciting. This year we had a lot of little kids. That used to not be a thing at our block party. But what was really encouraging to me is that we had probably a dozen people who it was their first time coming. Many of them had lived in the neighborhood less than a year. And several of them were actually renters. And I know we oftentimes don't always think of our renters as being as engaged civically. And it was just really encouraging to me that, like, just based off of a flyer and then some reminders on the posts in the neighborhood, that they came and met, longstanding neighbors. And I think that's the fabric that makes Wheat Ridge great. And I was just really encouraged that it wasn't, I love the 50 people come every year are beloved to me, but it was just really fun to see the new people. And then lastly, I just want to thank the city for being really responsive today. There was a water main break in our district near Applebacher Park, and while it was Wheat Ridge Water District's responsibility, the city showed up as this partner to help get that addressed, and hopefully, apparently that site's been an issue, and hopefully the Water District is able to resolve it this time. So I just want to thank the city for being responsive, and we heard from constituents. So, yay, Wheat Ridge.
Thank you. Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. And just two very, very short items here. The first one is speaking of marking your calendar, on September the 28th, that's a Saturday. I hope you can join us. For all the folks that live out in our new northwest side, we are having a little informal neighborhood get acquainted for all of our new neighbors that live in that part of the city. And it'll be running from about 9 o'clock in the morning till noon on September 28th. Again, that's a Saturday. And then the other thing is to remind folks that September is National Preparedness Month, and that there are some things that we can do to basically just be aware of the possibility that things can happen. And one of the things, the first things that you can do to find out some steps you can take and how to start a conversation on preparedness is simply go to it's called ready.gov, the government website, and you can learn about the type of common hazards, when an emergency strikes, some of the ways you can stay connected with your loved ones, and then some of the other ways you can find more information or register for various places that will provide you notification. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilor Dozman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just want to thank District 4 Business Pietro's Pizzeria for hosting my very rowdy family of about 40 people on Saturday to celebrate many, many birthdays, including my mother's. My bringer of life, which is today. So I want to wish my mom a happy birthday. And then my sister's is actually on 9/11. And that is a day of remembrance for not only the United States and us on the dais, but it's celebrated or remembered all across the country. And so it's a day for our family that we celebrate and also remember. But sounds like I missed a lot of amazing events on Saturday, and I'm really bummed, but it was really great to connect with my family at one of our local favorite restaurants. And we always go there for lots of family birthdays. So appreciate that.
Thank you. Councilor Weber.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to give a big thank you for all the citizens that came out for the preparedness event at Five Ridges Farm this weekend, and for Commander Lucas Hunt, who presented a great program, as well as Nathan Whittington from the Emergency Services of Jefferson County. And we also had Dr. Reagan Adams from the Colorado Department of Agriculture. And we were all having a discussion about how to evacuate animals in an emergency. And so it was really great to get connected on not only thinking about human preparedness, but also for our four-legged or three-legged or two-legged friends. So thank you, everyone. And thank you especially to the mayor who came out and introduced and represented Wheat Ridge so well, as he always does. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Rome.
Thank you, Mayor. So first, thank you, Councilmember Hulteen, for the invitation for the Happiness Gardens. It was a pretty amazing event. We had basically, it was like a very long table with, underneath the shade shelters. And the food was really amazing. Marissa is a very thoughtful chef, as she incorporated different indigenous types of foods and grains and told us about some of these grains are really special, only for special events. I was very honored to be a part of that. And she even told us, that she had made this dessert with squash. And I like squash, but the dessert she made was amazing. I loved it. And I think it was a creme brulee.
Creme brulee squash.
Yeah, it was really good. And what I liked most about was how enthused she was and proud to be part of the city, and telling us her story about all the different types of plants, what she was trying, and telling us about her past history with the Navajos and how they would dryland farm, and then telling us about like new types of plants that I wasn't aware of. And I think that's a really good thing. Happiness Gardens has come such a long way since when I first moved here. And so I want to definitely thank, my council members that have really spearheaded that, Hulteen and Councilmember Weaver and staff. I was talking to Susan Bennett about the bees and just getting a really good understanding of, what it takes for them to thrive and how they deal with different types of chemicals. And so, there's definitely something that Wheat Ridge needs to work on as far as getting the word out about pesticides, because they were losing some bees due to pesticides. But, what an amazing space that Happiness Gardens is. And then I also got an invite for the block party. And it's always amazing to talk, to different people. I get asked all the time, how do you like being on city council? And my response is always, I love it. We have such an amazing council and staff that I feel like we're always moving forward and we're doing good things for the city. And, Councilmember Hulteen is, when she says, top 5, that we should really be proud of that. That is really something. Top 5. We do have an amazing city, amazing gardens, and, keep moving us forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am on the board for the Porchlight Family Justice Center, and we have our Be the Light benefit coming up on September 19th. So don't put your calendars away yet. Please add September 19th on it. At 6 o'clock, you can get tickets at Porchlight FJC, FamilyJusticeCenter.org. What Porchlight does is we support victims of violence, and that's sex trafficking, child abuse, sexual assault, domestic violence, victims of gun violence. And this is a place where we have over 25 nonprofits co-located in one place. So as a victim of violence, you go and speak with one of our navigators. You only have to tell your story once. You only have to be re-traumatized that one time to tell your story. And you don't have to drive around to several different places to get services, because then our navigator goes and finds the services you need and brings them in the room. We also partner with over 75 different nonprofits throughout Jefferson County. So if you would like to come and support us at our Be the Light benefit, go to porchlightfjc.org and get your tickets for September 19th. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Stites.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't usually write stuff down, but there's been a lot of stuff going on the last couple weeks. I attended the Live Local event at Moonrise Gardens a couple weeks ago. Really great event. And it was really cool to see so many families with so many young kids. In fact, I walked in, I won't say which of the local work staff members I walked in. They were leading the baby shark dance, which was really cool. Really, really awesome. And then last week, I actually popped into the Makerspace and took one of the classes with Tyler, and it was really cool. He does a phenomenal job leading those classes. I actually did have the opportunity to clone myself a little bit on Saturday, just like Counselor Snell. My wife actually went and got one of her tattoos for the semicolon event. So thank you to Jefferson Center for doing that, and thank you for everybody who participated in that. Suicide does touch all of us, and it actually touched my family this year, and it's a very rough thing, and it's something that we need to definitely talk about. I want to thank Counselor Weaver for her hosting the large animal event at the Five Ridges Farms the other day, and really enjoyed the root beer floats as well. Those were amazing. And then the Chamber hosting the Wine Walk on 38th Avenue and helping support all the businesses out there. I didn't have an opportunity to do that because I was not able to clone myself. But thank you to everybody who participated in that. And then this week on Thursday night, if you have an opportunity, Local Works is doing an Explore 44 event and explaining what that is at Anderson Park from 5:30 to 7. So thank you very much. And if you can find it, you should find it by Wheat Ridge. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, all the counselors. Thank you for all the great information. Most of my thunder has already been taken, but I just want to roll over a couple of things. It was one thing that we didn't mention was a really great board and commission recognition event at Anderson Park over the last week or two. I want to thank staff and particularly our Parks Department for putting that together. We had a great entertainment and a great feeling of being there. I want to thank Councilor Hulteen for inviting me to Happiness Gardens and to meet Dr. Dwayne Goldman. He was a great guy to have it there, and he's got so many things that we were talking about. We really hit it off, and I want to thank you and really appreciate you bringing him to town. You know, Dr. Weaver hit it out of the park on Saturday, you know, with a large animal rescue and preparedness program. So thank you for doing that. I think it was really impactful for our community. You don't know it until you need it, and you need to be prepared. So I want to thank you for doing that. I want to thank Councilor Dozeman for bringing the plate tonight. It's great to have it here, but more than that, it's great to have all the people and volunteers that make that happen. So thank you. Please express our thanks to the folks that make that happen year after year. It's a great festival. I thought it was the best one yet myself. So even without the booms in the sky, but the rest of it was really great. The thing that impresses me about our city is we have so many great things going on and great people that are doing them. So I want to thank the folks that really engage in our community. There's a lot going on, and I hope you'll really be a part of it as you're able to learn more that's going on in our city. So we are going to, unless there's any more business come before council at our meeting tonight, we are going to adjourn and probably go right into our study session unless we need a break. But I think we will adjourn this meeting and move into our special study session. We'll be back here, Mr. Goff, we're back at study session next week here, right?
We are.
Very good.
Yes.
We will adjourn this meeting and begin the next one momentarily. Thank you. Yeah, be great. Okay.
Well, Lauren's, you ready to go? Why, Lauren's, yeah. She's pulling that up. Just as you all remember, we received a $2 million grant from from Congress and through the community. Yes, I'm sorry. Oh, you have an open, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Yep, go ahead and open it. Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to open our special study session, and we have two study items tonight. Item number one is naturally occurring affordable house, the NOAA program update. Item number two will be our tobacco products retail locations update. We have already taken public comment on items on the study session. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Goff.
Okay. Sorry about that,
That's
Mr.
okay.
Mayor, jumping ahead. But as I was saying, y'all remember we received a $2 million grant from Congress for a NOAA program, naturally occurring affordable housing. We've had at least one update from Terry Ware, our housing program manager, and we are here tonight to talk a little bit more specifics about how we plan on spending the money and get some direction and consensus from council. So just go ahead and turn it over to Terry.
Thank you. Good evening, City Council, Mayor. So I have a brief PowerPoint presentation. You have the memo detailing the program, and most of the presentation is really going to focus on sort of the background about naturally affordable housing, and in the latter part of the presentation, we'll talk a little bit more in specifics about the grant itself. So I'm going to talk about the context, what is naturally occurring affordable housing, talk about the structure of a program and the components of a program, and then talk about next steps related to that. So as Mr. Goff just mentioned, and most of you are aware, Wheat Ridge received $2 million from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Economic Development Initiative through their Community Projects Fund. And what's unique about this particular grant is, having worked at HUD for 8 years, this has less strings than I've ever seen attached to any federal funds. There's no requirement that it focus on low and moderate income housing or individuals, which is amazing. There's no cap on administrative costs. There are only a few requirements. The use of the grant has to comply with administrative requirements of the federal government, has to utilize the Buy America, Build America program, has to comply with all environmental review requirements, and that's not as easy as it sounds. And then all funds must be obligated within 6 years of the execution of the grant agreement. And we've received a draft of the grant agreement. There's some additional paperwork that needs to occur. As many of you are aware, there is a continuing resolution to continue funding the federal government. That may have an impact on when this grant agreement is executed because most of the staff is non-critical. So we'll come to that at a later date. The environmental review requirements are probably the biggest, I won't say bugaboo, but biggest challenge in utilizing these dollars. And regardless of how we use them, and I've suggested further in the memo that we talk about utilizing partners, any dollars that come in contact with those federal dollars are going to be required to the same requirements of the use of those federal dollars. Any partnership that we engage in has to abide by the same requirements that we abide by as the grantee and receiver of those funds. So, while there are very few strings attached, that doesn't make it an easy thing to do. So, we're awaiting further detail on the grant agreement and additional paperwork. So back to the subject, what's naturally occurring affordable housing? Most of you are already familiar with this as you reviewed the affordable housing strategy. Generally refers to housing that's rental housing that's affordable because of low rent or low market values. These unassisted rental buildings typically have lower rents because they're located in lower cost markets, of which Wheat Ridge is one, and we'll talk about why that's the case. These properties typically are held by one owner for a long period of time and may not have an active mortgage, and we'll talk a little bit more about the profile of the ownership. And these properties don't receive significant capital investment. The units that we're talking about are not subsidized units. They're not part of any kind of Section 8 program. They don't get vouchers. These are just units that, you drive through this community, duplexes, triplexes, the eightplexes that you see. Those typically are probably not public housing authority or subsidized projects. And so that's really the focus of what this program is designed to approach or target. So Wheat Ridge has approximately 15,000 housing units, has more affordable rental locations in the Denver area than most other subcommunities in Denver. Of those, approximately 4,000 plus or minus are multifamily units. They have a vacancy rate of about 7%, which, you know, is good for developers because anytime you get below 7 to 6%, that means that there's market demand out there. And of course, given the high cost of housing in general, the high cost of interest rates right now, still, you know, there are a number of populations who are being pushed into those rental units, making competition pretty tough. And then $62,000 yearly income required for the average rent, which is about $1,500 a month. So I know there's a lot of information on this slide. You know, there are two things that are key, I think, from this slide. One, Wheat Ridge has a smaller proportion than our adjacent communities in terms of large apartment complexes. Second point on this particular slide is that there are large and larger percentages each year of single-family homes that are becoming rental homes. And I think there are a number of factors leading to that, the inability to maintain homes because of higher interest rates, et cetera. So getting into the profile of the typical property owner, I was surprised by this number. The majority are retired or self-employed. The second bar, I assume you can see the presentation. Corporate entities are full-time investors, and those are private equity, who's getting more and more into this field, and REITs, real estate investment trusts, who are getting more and more into this field. And the REITs have become a real problem because small individuals are, you know, looking for investment opportunities that they don't understand the risk and necessity of maintenance and operation of these facilities. So that's become a real problem from an investment standpoint. But the real point of this slide is that 70% of most multifamily properties are owned by retired, self-employed, or part-time individuals or families. And so that's really a market that has some real constraints on their operation. Most of these individuals own these properties primarily for rental income or retirement income, or they're looking to assuage capital gains impacts for affordable housing, family security, primary residence in some cases. The majority of these units, 60% or greater, are in good or fair status, but many need substantial work and will need it soon. So relative to property maintenance and practices, and this information comes from the Turner Center out of Berkeley, California. It's a national survey, and so not specific to Colorado, not specific to Wheat Ridge, but just gives you some general background about some of the challenges associated with rental housing. In terms of the property maintenance issues, which is what the program is really trying to focus on, I think the key element here is when you look at the yellow bar, which is serious cash flow problems. Even for minor work, that still comprises a pretty significant challenge for many property owners. And when you get into deferred maintenance particularly, or major maintenance, cash flow is the major concern or challenge that these property owners have. So in terms of the programs that we looked at across the country, they really comprise two components. Some include education and assistance with grants, property management training, financial planning, et cetera. Because once again, given the population profile, the majority of these people are buying these properties for retirement purposes. They're not property managers, they're not real estate experts, they're not real estate investors. They're doing this because they see it as a profitable way or fairly easy way to provide long-term income. The second portion of most of these programs really focus on low-interest loans. So there are two, I want to underline the low-interest parts. Because you would ask yourself, well, why don't you just go to a bank to get a loan? Well, there are a couple reasons. One, most of them don't have a lot of collateral to begin with, and so the collateral tends to be the property. The second is for loans, between $1 to $3 million, the cost of doing business with the bank is greater than the return on the cost that the bank will receive from the loan. And so as a result, many banks don't, as individuals or individual entities, don't really play in this marketplace. some of the examples I cited in the memo, there are collaborations of banks. I think one I mentioned in Chicago, where there are 45 banks that have invested in that. Here locally, Colorado Gives has actually created the Bring It Home Fund, which has taken in submissions of dollars from banks. City of Lakewood is a municipal participant in that, private individuals, private equity, et cetera, to create a $15 million loan fund that really begins to focus on this particular problem. So, focus on non-subsidized small properties operated by moderate income individuals and families. This is a keynote of most of those programs. And once again, it's to try and push aside private equity or the corporate owners like Lincoln Properties, et cetera, or private equity who play in this arena. Allowable activities typically include functional upgrades, improved energy efficiency, financial stabilization and acquisition. And then, of course, these units must be affordable to populations at 60 to 120% average median income. So as we were evaluating these programs and thinking about what would it look like for Wheat Ridge to create its own NOAA program, there were several things that we took into account. The biggest hurdle or challenge is the administration of these programs. Because you're doing loans primarily or providing some financial assistance, there needs to be a significant amount of underwriting that occurs to identify the risk associated with these loans, as well as create a method for collection and recapture, if necessary. And so that requires some level of sophistication and staff support that we may be challenged by. The second component is educational and technical assistance, because there are grants, there are programs out there, there are banks, there are lenders who do operate in this arena, but most of these small property owners may be either unaware or not have the sophistication to put together a loan package or grant package. So a lot of the programs focus on that. The second consideration we thought, particularly with the $2 million that we received, is you have a couple of choices. You can get that money out the door as fast as possible, and in 2 or 3 years from now, have a few units that you've supported but have no money to continue to reinvest, because this problem isn't going to go away. I mean, over the long term, particularly given the age of housing in Wheat Ridge, the problem is probably going to increase in terms of maintenance issues. The other consideration is, why not maximize your return on investment? So one of the things, as an example, the Colorado Give program does is it takes those loans and the repayment of those loans and puts it back into the same program. So at least they have recurring funds that can be replenished and funds that then can be reinvested in properties. And then the last consideration is, how do you maximize the number of properties that remain affordable? And that's a challenge. And the affordable housing strategy, one of the cost factors it mentioned was that in their estimation, typically rehab would cost $75,000 to $100,000 per unit. And that's because you're going to be upgrading primarily plumbing facilities, the bath, the kitchens, and those are expensive. To take an example, the new units that were constructed by, with the partnership with Foothills Regional, were about $400,000 per unit. That's new construction costs. So, where do you want to play? Do you want to, it's much more effective to talk about trying to maintain existing rental units than it is to think about building new. And so, those were some of the considerations that we've thought about and want to discuss with council tonight, because, there are a variety of options and answers. So that's a long way of getting to our staff recommendations. Given the complexity of the NOAA program, what we would like to do is seek partners to expand the capacity and expertise involved in implementing the program and minimizing the long-term administrative obligations of the city. There are a number of partners, both within Wheat Ridge, as I said, Foothills Regional Housing, Colorado Gives Foundation. There are others, Mercy Housing, Habitat for Humanity, that are in the larger Denver region who also play in this arena. And all of them would be adequate partners and have expertise that we don't presently have. Select those partners whose practices and policies align with the city's goals to preserve existing affordable housing units through investment and capacity building, and invest funds in entities and activities which generate some reasonable return on that investment so that the fund can continue to operate. So in terms of how would we put together a request for proposals or solicitation for letters of interest from outside partners, we think there are 6 criteria that we've identified here. The most obvious one is these projects need to be located in Wheat Ridge. Two, they need to preserve existing affordable units. While new construction may be a viable alternative, really given the cost factor, this seems like the more reasonable approach. Projects with higher proportions of affordable units and affordability should be prioritized. Rehabilitation, renovation, including structural, system energy efficiency, and exterior improvements and acquisition are all eligible activities. On this particular point, we had investigated the idea about just looking at rehab and renovation, but there are a number of operators, Foothills as an example that just recently acquired the Manor project over on West 38th. There are two buildings there, and I'm not sure if they acquired both or just one. And that came about just sort of serendipitously. A broker called them, or a realtor called them and said, hey, you know, this project's coming up for sale. Are you guys interested? So they had to scramble to pull together funds to acquire the property without a lot of background information or due diligence that was exercised. And those opportunities are going to continue to arise. And we'd like to be in a position to partner with someone such as Foothills to be able to play in that arena as well. Units must remain affordable for a period of 5 to 10 years, depending upon the level of funding. And then administrative costs of the entity are limited to 5% of the project fund or administrative costs. And that's to try and make sure that the majority of our dollars that are invested really are going to do exactly what we identified. As I said, the main constraint from the grant itself is simply the idea that it must be spent in 6 years, and I don't think there's going to be any problem with that, and that they must comply with all environmental laws. That may be a problem just in terms of the timing, because at least my experience going through this process, sometimes the environmental review can take 12 months to 18 months. So, trying to be conscious of that and work with partners who understand the limitations on the use of these funds, as well as the fact that there are federal dollars. So all federal requirements would apply to the use of these funds and any funds that were associated with them. So that may be a constraint that may be a real challenge for some investors. Next steps, submit a scope of work and complete the contracting process with HUD in order to receive the funds. Begin drafting of requests for letters of interest to gauge the market interest. Evaluate those proposals, negotiate with the respondents, and then provide updates to City Council as we move through that process. And then other activity that we're presently engaged in, we've hired a consultant to verify the in lieu fee option. If you remember when we talked about inclusionary housing zoning at our last study session some time ago, one of the requests of council was to make sure that the in lieu fee, which is required by state law, doesn't push development somewhere else, doesn't have unintended consequences upon the cost of development, but does provide a source of income for the city to continue to invest in affordable housing. And then eventually a discussion with council about the Affordable Housing Fund, other uses, the role of City Council, and the role of the Wheat Ridge Housing Authority. So that completes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the, when you're talking about we have to keep the administrative expenses down to 5%, does that mean that what we would be doing is like a cost plus contract, like this cost plus you get the 5% for those types of projects?
We haven't worked out the details. I think it's just the idea that we want to make sure that the majority of funds that we invest go to the activity and not to the administrative component of it. As we take a look at the proposals and letters of interest and negotiate with different parties, at that time, we'll evaluate that. But it was basically just a cap for ourselves. Typically, most federal programs, like CDBG, require you to put a cap of 5% administrative costs. So we thought that was, fairly reasonable rule, but, we may come back and say that doesn't seem reasonable based upon what we've heard from various interested parties.
And then you had said that the funds need to be spent within 6 years.
They need to be obligated within 6 years.
Allocated within 6 years. And once the initial allocation, if we do have an account kind of like Colorado Gives does, where we end up loaning the money out or, and then it comes back into us. Once the money comes back into us, then at that point, it's already been allocated the one time. So
That's correct.
okay, great.
Yeah, at that point, in most federal programs, they would be identified as program income. But once again, with this particular grant, there are no such requirements that identify, what you do with the return on the investment.
Additional questions? Counselor Hulteen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks for the presentation. I have a question. There was a slide kind of earlier in your presentation that was about Wheat Ridge specific housing. And I just noticed in it just mentioned 80033. Is the data that you used for that just from that zip code, or did you actually use our municipal boundaries?
I don't know. I'll have to go back. I'd have to go back and take a look at. Let's see.
And I'm sorry, I didn't catch the slide number because I wasn't counting slides.
So there were a couple of slides. I want to say it was several bar graphs on one slide.
Yeah.
Most of the information that we've included in the slide came from either two sources. It came from the updated NRS that was done in 2019 that CZB is updating, so that information is still current. And then the other data source was the American Community Survey 2022 census information. So
Okay, I'm curious just because when we incorporate, I mean, the slide actually, the little text on it said just the zip code 80033. And
oh, I see I see the slide. Current Wheat Ridge snapshot, market snapshot, Q1 2024. 80033 zip code. Yes, I see it there.
Okay, I think it's important to just note that we have many zip codes in Wheat Ridge, and I think the reflection of our market would be impacted by inclusion. I mean, not significantly.
Well, the source for that particular graph was CoStar, which is a Realty data program and operation. So I can't verify.
Okay. I'm just making note that it's the one zip code is not reflective of the whole city. I'm curious if the city has contemplated how this would align with our requirements under House Bill 241313 in terms of affordable housing and access to transit, and if that's a consideration for prioritization of our investments in the community.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite see the question.
So DOLA just reached out to us actually today to participate in a group that helps establish the methodology by which we're holding municipalities accountable to 1313. So we probably don't know enough yet, but that can certainly be a part of our consideration criteria for any partnership that it further other potential goals or obligations that we have.
Yes, I think that's important since that's a process we're going to be engaging in and accountable to. So I think with this type of catalytic investment, I think we should be looking at alignment with that. And then also I'm curious with our Prop 123 funds, if these investments would count towards our pledge for affordable housing under that.
Yes, so if these funds result in a unit becoming deed restricted within the reporting period for Prop 123, then yes, those units would count.
Okay. Yeah, and I'll just share that it was two other things. I attended Dr. Cogg's board working session this last Wednesday, and they were presenting more of their regional housing assessment that the draft is completed, and they've really identified housing need actually in that 80 to 100% AMI. So I was excited to see that we're including that in our AMI. And then I just was also excited to see that Brothers Redevelopment is one of the eligible entities under this. They do a lot of really important work. And I'm very aware of my aging neighbors, as much as I love up here for us to be talking about how are we attracting new people moving here. We have a lot of seniors who are aging in place in our community, and really need to be able to either, move within Wheat Ridge or have reinvestments in where they're living so that they, have a quality of life that they deserve. So just when we will do a good process on this, but I am excited to see whether is eligible. So that's what I have. Thank you.
Additional questions? I had one. What staff impact might we expect this to have on our internal permanent staff? I mean, do we look for more FTEs that are going to happen out of this program, or?
We haven't really had that discussion. I think the fact that there are administrative costs that are associated with the grant, they can be covered by the grant. If there were a need for additional staff resources, utilizing the grant to do that certainly is an eligible activity. So,
But I think our primary goal is to keep that very limited.
Okay.
And that's why we're looking at these partnerships, because it could become very internally taxing if we were trying to run a program that there's partners out there that do it professionally and we don't. So that's our goal, is to keep the staff level down as much as possible.
and part of the challenge might be where you might get 3 applications for loans, and then nothing might happen for several months. So that person, would be sitting around twiddling their thumbs. So that's
Exactly. I mean, I think that's good. And then also that we don't get a program that has a good level of funding to it now, but doesn't have a long tail to it, and we get stuck in a place where we don't have the cover. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to that point around staffing, when I was on the board for Local Works, but was then Wheat Ridge 2020, we utilized almost $3 million in CBDG funds in rehabbing houses in Wheat Ridge. And they were income restricted also. We did that with one staff and then with a pretty dedicated volunteer team. So that might be something that we could potentially consider also. We know we have our housing authority. We do have some expertise on there, maybe not. We might need to kind of do some trimming and do some outreach if we wanted to use that, but I think that we have some opportunity there too.
Thank you. Additional discussion or questions? Councilor Larson.
Thank you, Mayor. First off, what is our AMI?
what we're proposing here is between 60 to 120%.
What is the number? What's the dollar figure?
Approximately 60%, I'm trying to remember from the ASS. It's about 63,900 up to 149, about 120, 129.
Okay. Thank you. Then I'm thinking more in terms of outcomes here, and the chart that's in the staff report here on distribution of renter-occupied housing lists single family and then duplex and then 10 or more. And it seems like the discussion kind of shines more on the multi-unit 10 or more as sort of a way to kind of get this thing moving. But when you look at the numbers, you add up the single family and duplexes, and you've got about the same amount of rental units. So, I would like to know a little bit more about how that would look. How would we get the single family rental property owners? How would we get them involved? Typically, as the note says, it is maybe a retired person, maybe a single person, or just a quick check of some of the duplexes and homes around my house that I know are rented. Many of those are owned by trusts, and they're owned by the out-of-town corporations. So there's probably a nice mix there, but it's still, to me, the big question is, how do you get them involved?
I think that's going to be a challenge. One, as we were talking about what kind of program structure you establish, I think it became pretty apparent that we have limited resources. And so what I'd say is the partners that we engage with, it would be their responsibility to talk about marketing, to talk about outreach. But I still think that's going to be a challenge for that particular market. You could say from an efficiency standpoint, the larger number of units probably makes more sense. Just from a construction standpoint, the challenge in housing is that when you have scattered site development, such as many housing authorities operate, it's more expensive, it's more complex, it's more time consuming. Whereas if you have the same number of units, let's say you have 10 single family units and you have one building that has 10 units in it, it's going to be much easier and streamlined to do that one building than it is going to be those 10 individual units. That doesn't mean that these folks would be excluded from a program, but I think that's a discussion, and if that's a concern, as we're talking to partners, we can certainly bring them up. Brothers Redevelopment, as an example, focuses very much so on single-family rehab. So there may be partners out there that do that, but it's a more complex process.
Real quickly to follow that up, I would think that a challenge here, at least initially, would be some sort of a way to pull together. I'm not even thinking of a database, but just some way to identify the different housing options. I mean, one house here is owner occupied and they reside, and then another one here is rented. So.
So I tried poking that bear. So I started with the Jefferson County assessor's records and contacted Jefferson County on several occasions to try and figure out if there was a query that you could do through their database that will identify these properties. And I got nowhere with that. I talked to a few realtors to see if there was an organization of property owners, particularly small multifamily property owners. There isn't one in the Denver metro area. So then, had some discussions internally about how would we market it? Would it be through newspaper advertising, or would we send out flyers to property owners? So all those are still, items or approaches for consideration. But once again, it's not an easy approach. As I mentioned in the memo, one of the things that Denver has done is to license or attempt to license multifamily property owners. And part of the reason for doing that is because there isn't a database that exists that talks about the condition, the location, the property owner, et cetera. So, it's difficult. Most of the other programs that we looked at, what they did was publish solicitations in the newspaper through their, economic development programs, through their community development programs, leaflets, knocking on doors, a fairly extensive approach, which is what San Francisco did to try and bring those owners of those properties in and then work with them to educate them and provide financial assistance.
I completely agree, and I believe that would be not only labor intensive, but very capital intensive, just trying to spread the net wide enough to make it worthwhile. But if you're able to get over that hill, I think you'd see probably a lot of interest.
Sure. Well, that's why we're hoping, by bringing in partners, by working collaboratively with other organizations that are in this arena, that, it'll raise both the visibility as well as our exposure to those.
Thank you. Councilor Hoppy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And a little bit more on that topic of detached single-family homes. To rehab a detached single-family home, the price is much more expensive than to rehab attached apartments, which could potentially share a boiler system, an air handler system, things like that. So I personally feel like we want to get the most bang for our buck that we can, and I see that happening in the multi-unit structures. But do we have a philosophy like a guiding philosophy where we want to make sure we're not doing mission creep, where it's our philosophy is that we want to get our most bang for our buck and get the most affordable units we can out there. What's our mission then that follows up that philosophy so that we can keep pointing back to that?
Well, one of the criteria that we've listed in the memo is the idea about getting the largest number of affordable units for the longest period of time of affordability. So that's definitely one of the criteria, and we'll evaluate that. So, an owner owns 2 single-family homes versus an owner who owns a multiplex unit. I think our priority would be that owner, to your point, of the multiplex unit, not excluding the others, because there may be circumstances that really drive that. Maybe there's, a need for ADA accessibility, which is, better provided for or family situation or others, in that single family home. But, you know, as we work through this program and talk to our partners, we'll be refining the criteria a bit more and update you through this process before we, you know, start putting money on the street.
Great, thank you. Mayor, to add to that real quick, if I could, just keep in mind that this won't be our only affordable housing program. This is just one potentially, as Terry mentioned in his memo. You know, we're hoping to build up our housing funds over the years with fees in lieu and other grants and opportunities. And we're going to be looking at other programming opportunities, and that could address single family and more than the know it will.
Thank you. Any additional questions or discussion on this item? Oh, Mr. Ware, thank you for bringing this to us tonight. Great presentation. I think it's
Just maybe consensus on the general direction that Mr. Ware presented.
Okay, so we've listed out, you know, some goals and some strategies, and do we have a favorable consensus to move this forward in this direction?
Yeah, and I think that we probably have to, right? That's the state law, so we'll have to do that anyway, but yes.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yes.
Looks like we have consensus to move forward, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we will move to agenda item number 2 on our special study session. This is the tobacco products retailer locations. Mr. Goff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to turn it straight to Mr. Dahl.
Okay. Thank you. The Councilmember Hoppe asked to have this brought to us. I did a little research. You have a memo in the packet that identifies the structure here, which is that, you know, tobacco sales is allowed in all the retail zone districts in the city. So the issue here is really licensing, not use, in that sense. And I think it's probably important to have that context. But yeah, in 2020 and I think in 2021, there were council study sessions on this. And the most recent, I think, was the one I have is 2021, because that's when this particular section, I've got the book here that shows when the code was amended, and it was in April of 2021. And that gave rise to the following problem. The rule is that there can't be tobacco retailers within 1,000 feet of a school. But at the time, there were retailers operating within 1,000 feet of a school, and the council said, we want to allow those to continue to operate. And that's what this rather convoluted section does. It says, gee, if you were lawfully in business on the effective date of Ordinance 1710, Series 2021, you can continue in business despite the fact that you're within 1,000 feet of a school. And you can continue in business if a new school gets built next to you. You know, you're somewhere out there and there's no school, and a school gets built and you're within 1,000 feet. Shouldn't be punished for that. Ally looked carefully at the videos from the various study sessions on this, and it now appears to us that the study session consensus was more than what was done, and was beyond saying that if you're in business, you can continue. It meant to say the property, if it's got a tobacco retail license, it continues to be eligible to receive, you know, if it gets sold and someone else wants to get a retail license in that location, they have to satisfy the other licensing requirements, pay the fee, et cetera. But the intention was that the exception to the 100,000 foot rule extend to the property, such that if I own that business, I can sell it to someone else and realize the value of the fact that I've got a licensed operation. No different, really, when you think about it, than liquor licensees. The new successor licensee still has to pay the fee, background check. It's a lot trickier for liquor, but it's the same kind of principle that they've got an operation in place there. That didn't happen, as far as we can tell, and it's clear it didn't happen in this ordinance from 2021. What you have in the packet is language which I put together that makes that happen. And I'll admit I made it happen because I thought, okay, that's what we want to do now. I now understand that that was the original intention, but the same language would accomplish that intention. And you see I've added It's pretty simple. It's saying, okay, if you were lawfully in business on that date, you or your successor in interest by purchase at the same location, then, and if you're ineligible, if any of these categories are ineligible, you are nevertheless eligible. That's the convoluted nature of this subsection, which we could rewrite holistically, but at this point, I'd rather not. This solution here does, I think, what the original consensus was to accomplish, and that's my story. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have questions of council on this? Councilor Hoppe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't necessarily have a question, but because we're not going to a motion, I do have discussion. I know that our intent was not to penalize small businesses. And one thing we need to keep in mind is when someone owns a small business, like that is your livelihood. And you put all of your time and effort into that. And for you to be able to say, okay, I'm ready to retire from this business, then your equity in that business is from all the blood, sweat, and tears you put into it. I own an HVAC company and an electrical company, and if I were to go to sell my electrical company and somebody said, that's fine, but you can't sell light switches, can't install or sell light switches, then that really wouldn't be beneficial to the new purchaser. And so I appreciate Council Dahl to add this language. I hope that I'll get support from council to be able to move this forward. You know, small businesses are really kind of the heart and soul of our community, and I want to make sure that we are not making it harder on them. There are a lot of things that small businesses already have to do that make it kind of difficult to be a small business anyways, so.
Thank you. Councilor Owen.
Thank you, Mayor. The question I have is, in the ordinance, it had stated youth-oriented facility, but in this, it omits that and it only says school. Was the intent that it would cover youth-oriented facilities?
Can you speak up? I'm just
Yeah.
really having trouble hearing
Yeah.
you.
So as I look at, right under the issue, it says operating with 1,000 feet of youth-oriented facility, which in parentheses, schools, parks, recreation facilities, and that's what was in the past version of the ordinance. But then there's references on the next page where it says who becomes ineligible to receive renewal license due to the creation of a new school. And I wanted to clarify, is this just, are we changing this just specifically for a school, or can we change that to youth-oriented facility?
I think it's a fair question. I think in looking at sort of the structure of the code section here, it's intending to talk about schools and youth-oriented facilities, and then it kind of defaults to shorthand using the word school throughout. But letter C talks about the subsection just above this one talks about schools and youth-oriented facilities, establishes the 1,000-foot limit, and then letter D creates the exception. And I'd be happy to hear council discussion on it, but I think that the exception, when it just narrows it to school, probably inadvertent, or, was using school in the generic sense. We can certainly, and I'm happy to do it in the revision of subsection D, because subsection C doesn't need any revision, it says youth-oriented in schools. And I can add that to the new language for subsection D. But I think you're right. I think the intention, when you look at the whole works, was that we're talking about schools in the generic.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor Hoppe.
Could we perhaps say something like, due to the creation of youth-oriented spaces as described in subsection C?
Yes. Yes, I think we can. We'll probably need a couple of different sort of references back to C to make that happen. But let me, I won't do it in front of you here, but let me tinker with the language to, I see the issue we need to solve. I can do that.
Additional discussion on this issue, questions? Do we have consensus to move this concept forward and having Mr. Dahl work in the language that they need to sort of include such as schools, parks, recreational facilities? Move that forward? We do. Does that answer your questions?
Terrific.
It does.
Yes, it does. I've got what I need. You'll see it next meeting.
We'll schedule this for first reading. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see. We probably have staff reports. Mr. Goff?
No other staff reports.
No
Thank
staff reports? Okay. Any further elected officials matters? It's like we're getting to the end here. We have a study session coming next week. Thank you all for coming. Please drive safely and carefully through our city. Councilor Hulteen.
I had totally forgot earlier that this Saturday from noon to 2, there is a crosswalk painting event as part of our Safe Routes to Parks. And I hope everyone who loves to paint streets like I do will volunteer to come out and be part of that. This is an exciting opportunity to really improve safety for kiddos who are accessing schools and parks in our neighborhood. So at noon to 2 on Saturday, and it is at, oh my gosh, thank you, 47th and Miller. That's all I got.
Okay, and if you're going to say that, then I'm going to say earlier that morning on September the 14th at 9 o'clock, we'll have coffee with the mayor at Vinola's Italian Restaurant. If you'd like to come and have a cup of coffee with us and some great conversation, we'd love to have you. There's no more items to come before our study session. We will stand adjourned, and thank you.